It is Friday, which means our first hour is our national town hall meeting with Senator Bernie Sanders, the guy I think of as America's senator, although the good citizens of Vermont, and I was one for 10 years, are very proud to call him theirs. Senator Sanders, welcome.
Good to be with you, Tom.
Always great to have you, Senator. So what's on your mind and this week?
Well, what's on my mind this week is that I will be beginning work as the ranking member of the Budget Committee. That is the leader of the opposition. And I'm going to do my best to work with the American people. And I'd love to hear some ideas today, Tom, about how we can craft a budget that works for the American middle class, the working families of our country, the elderly, the children, the sick and the poor, rather than just the billionaire class. And we're going to have some real ideological differences on the committee. There are a lot of very strong conservatives who are going to fight to cut Social Security, to cut Medicare, to cut Medicaid, to give more tax breaks to people who don't need it. So you're going to have a real clash of ideas, and it's very important that millions of people become engaged in that debate. What kind of budget do we need? And I think, Tom, before you can determine what kind of budget you need, you have to understand what kind of problems exist that you're trying to deal with. And to me, the major problem that we're facing is the decline, the 40-year decline of the American middle class, where median family income has gone down by $5,000 since 1999, where millions of people are working longer hours for lower wages, where 40 million people still have no health insurance, and at the same time, the people on top are doing phenomenally well. Wall Street doing phenomenally well, corporate profits at an all-time high, wealthiest people, top 1% earning more income than the bottom 95%. So given that context, how do you rebuild the middle class? Well, one of the things that you do is you create jobs. Because real unemployment, while unemployment is a lot better today than it was 6 years ago when Obama came in, no question about that, we made some progress. Real unemployment remains at over 11%. Youth unemployment close to 18%, African-American youth unemployment close to 30%. We have got to create jobs. And what the economists tell us is that the fastest way to create decent paying jobs is to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure. And that is why I have will introduce legislation to put $1 trillion over the next many years into rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure. And when you do that, you not only make the country more efficient and productive by rebuilding our bridges and our roads and our water systems and our rail and our airports. Think what it means. Just imagine what it means that all over this country, systems that are now falling apart or are inefficient are now significantly made to be cutting edge. And in the process, we create or maintain 13 million jobs. Wow. So that is a major, major priority to me. Second of all, I think we are seeing a movement all over this country to raise the minimum wage. My state of Vermont and other states have done that. We've got to raise the minimum wage here at the national level. But also we have to deal with this issue of overtime pay. I don't know, Tom, is that an issue you've talked about much?
Not a great deal, but it certainly is worthy of it, that and sick pay.
Right. Well, here's the issue with overtime pay. Right now, there are many companies, McDonald's and many others, that say to somebody, if you are a quote-unquote supervisor, that means you have a couple of people working underneath you, you are ineligible for time and a half. Millions of people are in that position, and yet they are earning very low wages. And what we want to do, and are asking the president through an executive order to do, is to raise that level to somewhere around $56,000. So people who are making less than that, who are quote unquote in executive type position, administrative positions, they will get time and a half. This will be a huge step forward for many middle class workers today who are working 50, 60 hours a week, but are not getting time and a half. So that's an issue we want to focus on. We want to focus on the issue of pay equity so that women do not continue to make 78 cents on the dollar compared to the same work done by men. There is a very, very important issue that will be coming before Congress in the not too distant future, and that is the Trans-Pacific Partnership. I am strongly opposed to that trade agreement because I believe that similar type trade agreements have resulted in the loss of millions of decent paying jobs in this country and the shutting down of manufacturing plants all over America. So the issue there is how you create a trade policy that works for ordinary people, for workers, rather than just the CEOs of large corporations. It's a very large agreement. There's virtually no transparency, so we don't know what's in it. But if it's based on the same principles that previous trade agreements like NAFTA, CAFTA, PNTR with China were based, it is something we should not be supporting. I have been active as a member of both the Energy Committee and the Environmental Committee on the issue of climate change. The Keystone Pipeline bill will start, I believe, will be on the floor next week. I have an amendment, very simple amendment, that will ask the members of the United States Senate as to whether or not they agree with science, as to whether or not they agree with the overwhelming majority of scientists who tell us that climate change is real, caused by human activity, already causing devastating problems in our country and around the world, causing serious problems to our oceans. Just an article out there the other day about what this is doing to various species in the ocean, the acidification of the ocean, very serious problem, rising sea levels. The scientific community is telling us that climate change will result in the warming of our planet from between 5 degrees Fahrenheit to 10 degrees Fahrenheit by the end of this century. Think of what that will mean to this planet. And it is something that we have got to address now. And I'm very pleased that the Pope has come out and spoken out on this issue as well.
The New York Times has a piece on their front page today. 2014 turns out it was the warmest year in the recorded history of the Earth. Now that's recorded, so since humans have been around, but the warmest year ever.
And the evidence is very clear. We are seeing droughts in this country. We're seeing an increase in forest fires. We're seeing more extreme weather disturbances. We are seeing a great concern that when people around the world are unable to grow their crops because of drought or have to move because of floods, this raises serious national security issues, something the Department of Defense here is very worried about. So it's an issue that we have got to address, and the way you address it is to transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energies.
It absolutely seems that way. Senator Bernie Sanders is with us. It's our Brunch with Bernie hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program, our national town hall meeting, your opportunity to talk with Senator Sanders. We'll be taking your calls in just a moment. Be sure to check out Bernie's website at sanders.senate.gov and his Facebook page. Just plug Bernie Sanders or Senator Sanders into Facebook and it'll pop right up. It's one of the more active sites on Facebook. Great stuff. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And, of course, you can drop into our live free chat room over at thomhartmann.com and all that sort of thing. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Senator, ready to take some calls?
Let's do it.
Okay, Steve in Phoenix, Arizona, watching Free Speech TV. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Good morning, Senator. What I would like to talk about today is with the State of the Union address coming up this Tuesday night, is there any way that you might have the President Obama, his ear possibly, and if you do have his ear, Could you put a little bug in it and suggest to him that he let the American people know what a dastardly plan that the Republicans are planning for Social Security disability with this, phony baloney contrived disability income crisis? And if there's any way he could channel his inner Harry Truman. And I'll tell you this, it would help a lot, too, in the next election for Democrats if he would blast them and let the people know what's really going on.
Steve, it's funny that you mention that, because I just held a press conference here in Washington. I'm not usually here on Friday, but I am here today talking just about that issue. And here's what Steve is talking about. The facts are that Social Security has $2.6 or more trillion in its trust fund, can pay out every benefit owed to every eligible American for the next 18 years. And what is happening is that one of the funds, the smaller fund, which provides disability benefits to some 11 million Americans, is running out of money, which would mean it would only be able to pay out 80% of benefits. What has historically happened is when one of the funds runs out of money, you reallocate money from the other fund into it. It's happened 11 times. It has happened 4 times under President Reagan. So you have a significant surplus. You transfer some money from one fund to another. It is not a big deal. What the Republicans have said on their very first day that the Republican House was in session, what they did was change a rule to say that they don't want to do that anymore. They don't want to reallocate. What they want to do is to use that crisis, as Steve indicates, to say that the only way that they will reallocate money is by cutting Social Security benefits in one way or another. That may be through a so-called chain CPI, maybe by raising the retirement age, whatever. So the first thing that they want to do on the first day that they are back in session is to move to cut Social Security. My view is not only should we not be cutting Social Security, we should be expanding Social Security, because you got millions of seniors today trying to survive on inadequate benefits in terms of being able to pay for their medicine, their food, to heat their homes. They're just not making it. But the first thing the Republicans want to do is use a phony crisis to cut Social Security benefits, and we are going to fight them tooth and nail. We're going to fight to expand Social Security benefits, not cut them.
It really says something about the Republicans. Yesterday, somebody called in and said they'd called Kevin McCarthy's office about this and gotten a non-response. And then a whole bunch of people called in and said that Kevin McCarthy's office stopped taking calls. It was amazing.
Well, that's what we need to do.
Yeah. Senator Bernie Sanders with us. It's our Brunch with Bernie hour. We'll be back with more of your calls for Senator Sanders. Right after this, it's 20 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Senator Bernie Sanders on the line with us. It's our Brunch with Bernie hour, our national town hall meeting, and Cliff in Canyon Country, California. You are on the air with Senator Sanders.
Well, good day, Tom and Senator Sanders. Senator, you already hit on my topic quite a bit. I would just like to add the recent news of methane releases within the Arctic region and Siberia to the discussion. But with all this going on, we have James Inhofe chairing the Science Committee, and he's basically the biggest climate change denier in politics, wrote a book calling it the biggest hoax ever perpetrated on the American people. And it seems to me he's gotten a pass on his stance. No one is calling him out in the corporate media. My question is, how do we expose him and or shame him in regards to his climate change denial? And do you think that would be an effective tactic, making his denial stance more public and widely known?
The answer is yes. I know Jim Inhofe very well. Jim is an honest, sincere guy, but he is completely wrong on this issue. And you're exactly right. He believes that climate change is one of the great hoaxes ever perpetrated on the American people. And if you can believe it, he is the man who will be chairing the Environmental and Public Works Committee, which has oversight on climate change issues. Should we call them out on this issue? The answer, Cliff, is absolutely. I mentioned earlier that I will have an amendment on the floor, very simple amendment, that says to the United States Senate, are you going to listen to the scientific community, which is overwhelmingly in support of the concept that climate change is real, caused by human activity, already causing devastating problems, and that we need to transform our energy system? We're going to bring that amendment onto the floor, and we'll see how many Republicans are prepared to vote in support of science. I'm quite sure that Senator Inhofe will not be one of them. We'll see if any of them are prepared to do that. And if not, I mean, you will understand how scary a situation is when you have a dominant political party rejecting basic science as they go forward in developing energy policy.
Len in Cedarhurst, New York. You are on the air with Senator Sanders.
Hi, Senator. Such a big fan. I think there are two things or three things that you have to focus on in order to run for president. The first, you were talking about Social Security, that if you raise the cap, then there would be no problem. But beyond that, if you raise the cap, you could tell your average worker aged 18 and up that you could actually lower his rate at the same time. Between that and selling the fact, like President Obama, that you want to make college near free or free, and somehow or another cap student loan issues going, retroactively, you could probably raise the under 30 turnout from 15-20% to 40-50%.
Thank you, Len.
All right, Len makes great points. These are exactly the issues that I talk about all the time. I think you're going to hear more and more members of the U.S. Senate talking about it. The Republicans, in fact, get away with murder because their agenda is the agenda of the 1% and the agenda of Wall Street and the agenda of corporate America, but for a variety of reasons, including the ineptitude of the corporate media, most people don't know what they stand for and what they do. And you mentioned a moment ago how when people started calling up a congressman saying, we understand what's going on, we disagree, they stopped talking, or they refused to respond. We need millions of people to make those calls. The American people, whether they're progressive or conservative or in between, understand that when senior poverty is going up, when so many seniors are struggling, when so many people with disabilities are struggling, you do not cut Social Security and then at the same time give tax breaks to billionaires and large corporations. And Len is right. That is an issue we have got to bring on the table, whether I run for president or somebody else runs or whatever. That has got to be front and center. And the second issue that Len appropriately talks about is that in the midst of an incredibly competitive global economy, where we need to have the best educated workforce in the world, you've got hundreds of thousands of young people who no longer can afford to go to college or get a higher education of any type. That's crazy. And you got millions of people leaving school deeply in debt, paying 5, 6, 7% interest rates on their college loans. That's crazy as well. It's like we're going to war against our own young people. And meanwhile, youth unemployment is 18%. This is the future of this country. We should support our young people, not go to war against them. And Len is exactly right. College education in this country should be free or at least affordable to every person in this country. And it's not just young people. Other people need to go back for retraining and so forth. And people should not have to come out of school deeply in debt. That is a very, very important issue, which in fact will resonate with millions of young people.
Pete in Tyler, Texas. Pete, we just have a minute to the break. I know you have a real quick question.
Yes.
Go for it.
Senator Sanders, I have heard, I believe, on this program that when Medicare was instituted many years ago, it's a wonderfully successful program. Everybody loves it. It was stated at the time it was instigated that it was intended to be incrementally lowering, to have the eligibility age incrementally lowered over time. Why didn't the Congress try to do this the first time and thereby establish a precedent for lowering the age, and just start lowering the age and avoid this horrible mess that has been the ACA debate over the last...
Pete, we're going to have Senator... Your question wasn't quite so short. We're going to have Senator Sanders answer that on the other side. Is that okay with you, Senator?
Sure. Absolutely.
Okay, we'll pick that up on the other side. This is the news break at the bottom of the hour. So we'll be back in 5 minutes with Senator Sanders' answer to Pete's question and more of your questions for Senator Sanders in our Brunch with Bernie segment, our national town hall meeting here on the Thom Hartmann Program.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-536-2370.
And be sure to check out Bernie's website, sanders.senate.gov. You can sign up for his newsletter, The Bernie Buzz. You can hop over to his Facebook page. There's all kinds of great stuff there. Minutes before the hour. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. It's our Brunch with Bernie hour. Senator Bernie Sanders. And Senator, what the caller was referring to, he said, I've heard it on this program, on page 89 and 90 in my book, Rebooting the American Dream, I quote Robert M. Ball, who was the principal author of the Medicare legislation. And he names all the other people who were the authors. I won't bore you with a list. And he says, we saw insurance for the elderly as a fallback position, which we advocated solely because it had the best chance politically, although the public record contained some explicit denials. We expected Medicare to be the first step toward universal national health insurance, perhaps with kiddie care as the next step. So that was the caller's question.
Well, I mean, I think that is exactly what should happen. Obviously, the healthcare situation is different state by state. In Vermont, as in all states, seniors have Medicare, which works well. And many of the kids in Vermont and other states have the Children's Health Insurance Program. So we have pretty good coverage for the children, pretty good coverage for seniors, but the people in between are struggling. I believe that the most cost-effective and efficient way to guarantee health care to all people is to do exactly what Pete talks about, and that is to have a Medicare for all, which becomes a single-payer national system. So I agree with Pete in moving in that direction.
Dave in Hines City, Florida. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Good afternoon, Tom and Senator Sanders. My question is, why don't you and Senator Brown from Ohio and Senator Warren from Massachusetts and a few of the other more progressive senators who actually have some common sense and can see things the way they really are, why don't you put holds on bills that are hurting people, coming up or going to hurt people? I mean, Republicans, Vitters, and some of the others put holds on things all the time. So why don't you use your hold to protect us?
Dave, you are absolutely right, and I think you will see that happening. End of discussion. I mean, we will... I can't speak for other people, but I think Senator Warren, Senator Brown, and many others will use the rules of the Senate as most effectively as we can in order to defeat Republican proposals which are going to hurt working families. So I think, Dave, you will see a lot of that.
Stephen in Riverdale, Maryland. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Oh, yes. Good day, Senator Sanders, and you too, Mr. Hartman. Real quick, Senator Sanders, is corporate welfare more costly to the taxpayer than public welfare?
Well, I think, Stephen, that depends on how you define quote-unquote welfare or quote-unquote corporate welfare? And I don't know the answer to that. I mean, there are some people who look at Social Security as welfare, Medicare as welfare. Obviously, they are not. But this is what I will tell you. Corporate welfare costs the taxpayers of this country many, many, many billions of dollars. And I'll give you just many, many examples of that. But one example is the following. The Walton family that owns Walmart is the wealthiest family in America. They're worth, I think, something like $150 billion. And one of the reasons they get to be so wealthy is they pay their workers inadequate wages. Now, they end up having many, many thousands of workers who are working for $9 an hour or $8.50 or $10 an hour who cannot take care of their families because their wages are so low. And those workers have to get Medicaid for health insurance. They have to get food stamps to feed their families. And sometimes they have to get affordable housing paid for by or subsidized by the government. It, to my mind, makes Walmart and the Walton family the largest recipient of welfare in this country, because the taxpayers of this country are subsidizing their business because they pay their workers such low wages. And there are many, many, many other examples of corporate welfare which add up to tens and tens and tens of billions of dollars.
Ross in Baltimore, Maryland. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Good afternoon, Senator. I served in the United States Army for 8 years, leaving the service as a captain. Considered continuing public service by becoming a teacher, but my pay would have been sliced in half. If we on the left truly believe that education is the silver bullet, is there anything we can do to close this pay gap so that we attract more of our best and brightest as teachers from every field and not just the military?
Ross, great question. You know, this gets down to our national priorities. What we think is important and what we do not think is important. College football coaches make many millions of dollars a year. Professional athletes make huge amounts of money. The heads of hedge funds make, in some cases, over $1 billion a year. And yet people who do the most important work, which is to educate our young people, in some cases, are making extremely inadequate salaries. So what I would say to Ross is we have got to change our national priorities. We have got to make education and significant improvements in education, from childcare to higher education, a major priority. And when you do that, we do have to attract the best and the brightest. Rather than having them go to Wall Street, I would rather them being in classrooms throughout America. And to do that, we are going to have to pay good wages for good teachers. And I support that.
Jim in Lockport, Illinois. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Senator Sanders and Tom, how are you guys?
Great.
Good.
All righty. Senator Sanders, actually, there's two parts to my question. I'll make it quick. I've been watching the debates on the Senate floor as far as Keystone XL. And I think a lot of your colleagues over there should use a dictionary because they truly don't know the meaning of the word independence. When we use and I've heard that word energy independence all the time, and maybe you can refer them to the Revolutionary War or War of Independence to set up a new nation. But one of the things I want to talk about is the Keystone is in a refining process and the aftermath of that, which is that petcoke. Why are we going to allow that to stay in our country? It's just a toxic sludge that I think should be shipped back to Canada. Why should we be responsible for that? And maybe we can have that in an amendment where it's actually transported back to Canada so they can dispose of it.
Well, that's the situation in Detroit. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it's Detroit and Chicago, and there's a few other places. They got these piles of pet coke that are poisoning downwind communities.
Look, for a wide variety of reasons, including the sludge, including the fact that we had tar sands oil leak into the Kalamazoo River, including the fact that we need, and most significantly, we need to transform our energy system away from fossil fuel and most certainly away from some of the dirtiest oil on the planet, which is the tar sands oil that would be excavated and transported through the Keystone pipeline. So there are a million reasons, I think, to defeat Keystone. The most significant is that we need to transform our energy system and not become more dependent on fossil fuels.
Mike in Manistee, Michigan. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Hello, Tom. Greetings from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan.
Thank you.
And Senator Sanders, such an honor. It's wonderful to be able to speak to you today. And my question specifically is about the Republican manufactured 20% cut in Social Security disability. And we know what the House did this week, a parliamentary rule that will not allow any transfer of money. But now on the Senate side, is there anything that can be done to reverse or prevent this from going through? And then also, what kind of support do you see from the White House regarding this?
I think there is something that can be done. I will do it. Others will do it. I think since the 1950s, on 11 occasions, we have done what's called reallocation, taking money from one fund into the other fund. And that is what we have to do. This has always been non-controversial, and it has always been bipartisan. But the Republicans want to use this manufactured crisis to either cut disability benefits for some of the most vulnerable people in this country, or else to say the only way we're going to take money out of the retirement Social Security fund is by cutting benefits. So they're going to war against people with disabilities, and they're going to war against the elderly in this country, and we are not going to allow them to do that. So there are a number of ways that we can fight back, and we intend to do that.
Senator, we just have about 20, 30 seconds left if you want to.
You know, it just speaks to the priorities. Michael's last question on Social Security just speaks to their priorities. At a time when so many people are struggling, the first item on their agenda is to cut Social Security and or disability benefits. It is absolutely incredible.
Hopefully the American people are paying attention. Senator Bernie Sanders is with us. It's our Brunch with Bernie hour, our national town hall meeting here on the Thom Hartmann Program. We'll be back with more of your questions for Senator Sanders in just a moment.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And be sure to check out Senator Sanders' website, sanders.senate.gov, and check out Bernie's Facebook page as well. Welcome back. Sydney, watching Free Speech TV on the Dish Network in Pollock, Louisiana. You are on the air with Senator Sanders.
Thank you. Mr. Sanders, these private contractors that were doing jobs that our military should have been doing, now that they're injured and coming back, are they being placed on Social Security disability? Who's covering their cost?
That's a good question, Sydney. My guess, well, I think they are going to. That's a very good question, and I can't give you a definitive answer. Are they being taken care of by the private companies, or is the government going to provide the benefits to them? I should know the answer to that, Sydney. I don't.
Paul in South Lyon, Michigan, watching Free Speech TV. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Yeah, thanks, gentlemen. The Republicans are attaching all kinds of amendments to legislation that will hurt the American people and help billionaires, such as weakening Dodd-Frank and the Volcker Rule, deporting children of immigrants, cutting Social Security. Is it possible for the Democrats and yourself to also attach amendments to help the middle-class people, or do you lack enough votes to do that?
Well, we are the minority, so many of the amendments that we offer will not get majority support, I suspect. But we are prepared and are working hard to be as effective as we can in the minority. And that, of course, means stopping bad legislation. That was what a caller asked us a few moments ago, and doing our best to offer good legislation and putting the Republicans in a position where when millions of people are supporting that legislation, they're going to have to support it as well, making them an offer that they can't refuse. So, number one, we have to highlight what they are doing. They get away with murder because the American people often are not aware of what they are proposing. First order of business in the House, to cut Social Security. How many people think that that's a good idea? Well, we've got to get the word out, and we have got to come up with an alternative proposal to say, not only are we not going to cut Social Security, we're going to expand Social Security. Dodd-Frank, everybody in this country understands that we are crawling out of this terrible recession that Wall Street greed and recklessness put us into. And what Republicans want to do is take out key provisions of Dodd-Frank and be back in a situation where the taxpayers of this country will be forced to bail out the recklessness of speculation on Wall Street. Who thinks that makes sense? Very few people. But that's what Wall Street wants. So our job is to fight back, is to develop strong grassroots efforts to put pressure on the Republicans, and then to offer alternative ideas which in fact address the needs of a declining middle class.
Senator, in the 30 seconds till the break, what can the average person listening or watching do to help?
Look, as I mentioned several times, the Republicans are successful because people don't know what they are trying to do. Tom, you have heard me on the show months and months and months before the election telling you what I thought the Republicans would do, and that is to cut Social Security, cut Medicare, cut Medicaid, and give tax breaks to the wealthy. That is what they are doing. And the American people have got to get on the phone, get on their computers and start emailing, rallying their friends and neighbors and say, sorry, you're not going to get away with that.
Senator Bernie Sanders with us. We'll be back with more of your calls from Senator Sanders right after this. Occupying the media 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. Thom Hartmann here with you. It's our Brunch with Bernie hour. Senator Bernie Sanders, our national town hall meeting, taking your calls. Richard in Chicago, listening to WCPT. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to talk to you, Senator, and Tom, thank you very much. I'm a conservative Republican, and I'm actually running for office in my local village. And I totally believe in a single-payer health care. That it's extremely important to help people's lives. I actually believe in quite high taxation, and if the money is used honestly. And my biggest problem, Senator, is that if I go all out and I support you or support single payer, I want that money going somewhere other than Washington, D.C. I want it to go to Phoenix, Arizona, or to Walla Walla, Washington. I want it going someplace where special interests can't get a hold of it, where our government can't borrow that money and use it for something else, because that's my biggest fear. I totally believe in many progressive causes because I look at things as right and wrong, good and bad, instead of in the political sphere. Taxation is not a bad thing if it's used to make everybody's lives better and it's accountable. And I'm just worried that if we go to single payer, that it'll just get screwed up like many other massive programs. What can you do to help me?
Richard, I think those are very good comments. I will tell you my personal experience. When I was mayor of the city of Burlington, we raised taxes, but we told the people where the money was going, and we made sure it went exactly where we said it would go. We said, look, we have to rebuild our streets, and this is how we're going to do it, and this is how much money it costs, and this is how long it's going to take us. And people said, okay, that makes sense. They voted tax increase. That is what we did. Richard makes, I think, a very profound point, and that is really the issue is not big government or small government. The issue is efficient government. If I tell people that we're going to raise taxes in this country so that every young person who has the desire and the ability can get a higher education without leaving school deeply in debt, most people will say that's a good idea. But I want to make sure that program is done efficiently. I don't want to see waste. I don't want to see fraud. So I think Richard's point is exactly right. In terms of single payer, conservatives should be in favor of single payer because it is the most cost-effective way to deliver health care that I can imagine. We spend, as a nation, almost twice as much per person as do the people of any other country. What conservative should think that spending almost twice as much per person on health care makes sense? Is that conservative? I don't think so. So, Richard, thank you. You make a good point. The issue is not just taxation. It's who gets taxed and it's how you spend the money and making sure that government spends that money efficiently and on the right projects.
Tom in Portland, Oregon, listening on X-Ray FM. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Hey, thanks for taking my call. Hey, recently my wife hurt her back and needed to go to the doctor and was prescribed some physical therapy. And we were surprised to find out that we buy our own insurance. It's not covered. Physical therapy is not covered under our policy, and I'm wondering why that would be allowed to be, a policy would be allowed to be sold that didn't cover something as basic as physical therapy. Thank you.
The function of insurance companies is to make as much money as they can. And they want to craft policies which are profitable for them. To my mind, the idea of not covering physical therapy does not make any sense at all. The idea of not covering preventative health measures so that people can do things that prevent illness rather than having to go to the doctor or the hospital, not covering that does not make sense. In general, we have made some progress in recent years. And I can tell you that right now there are hospitals all over Vermont and all over this country which are now providing care in terms of chiropractic care, acupuncture, physical therapy, nutrition, and that there are policies which cover those procedures. But apparently Tom does not have one of those policies.
Bill in St. Paul, Minnesota, listening on 950 AM. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Hello there.
Hey, Bill.
Hi, Tom. Hi, Senator. My question is if the senator has any way of knowing if all these tax breaks for the wealthy, corporate subsidies, and other related monies would indeed end up in offshoring to Cayman Islands, Swiss bank accounts, or what have you. Thank you.
Well, of course, that's where they go. I mean, and the fact that corporations can stash their money in the Cayman Islands and in Bermuda and all over this country and all over the world, in Luxembourg, etc., results in us losing about $100 billion in revenue every single year. In the early 1950s, corporations paid about 32% of our total amount of revenue that the federal government brought in. Today, that number is 10%, and that is one of the reasons. So one of the loopholes is exactly that corporations can stash their money in the Cayman Islands and Bermuda and elsewhere, and those are the types of loopholes that we should be getting rid of.
Senator, in the 30 seconds to the end of the hour, final thoughts?
Yeah, my final thought is that the Republicans who ran a campaign for election criticizing Obama, and those candidates who supported Obama are now revealing what they stand for. And what they stand for is not what the American people stand for. And we can beat them. We can defeat their legislation, come up with good proposals. But the only way we are going to do that is when millions of people get involved in the political process, start sending emails, start making telephone calls, and tell the Republicans that they're not going to support legislation that protects the rich at the expense of everybody else.
Senator Sanders, thanks so much again for being with us this week.
My pleasure.
And for the great work you're doing in the Senate.